Okay, so next then we're going to move on to Adam's chosen topic. If you don't follow Adam Hopcroft, please do a Hopcroft13. So every week he will put out a couple of options for topics, and then the followers choose. So this week they chose how to recover from a bad start. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, so I suppose the reason this is a subject after my own heart at the moment, because in my opinion, I've not had the greatest starts. I'm around at the million rank, which I don't think is disastrous, but it's below where I would want to be. We also looked at a few other, and I think just to call out a couple of one of our fellow Hub podcast, I think, who got the assist. I think they did a really good podcast on sort of the luck versus skill element, and I think that was the other topic that people were considering. So, listen to them. It's I enjoyed that anyway, listening to how lucky Bruno owners were this week. But anyway, I digress. So what we're going to go through how to turn around a poor start to the season. I'm interested in your thoughts there, Fergie, because I feel at the moment, and this just could be because of the array of options available, but I think when we've had a couple of red arrows, I think the game is harder to play.
Right.
I think it's really easy. I think when you've got a good rank and everything is going well, this game is actually really easy. You make the obvious decisions, and 9 times out of 10, they seem to pay off. Or because you're quite high up, you don't get a huge dip in rankings. So I'm keen to get your thoughts and tips here, because I could do with some, because I want to be coming into next week with a green arrow for the podcast. So
I just realised that you're really, really fortunate, because our subscribe button is actually hiding the red arrow on the screen. So I'm going to have to fix that for next week. So I think the first things, I know a lot of these sound quite obvious, and they're probably a lot harder to actually do, to actually execute. But I think the first thing, and I did this last season, right? So last season, I had 4 or 5 really good seasons on the trot. Last year I had a nightmare, and what I did, I just kept on panicking and chasing hauls week after week. I kept jumping onto the next big thing, the next big captaincy for the next week. And I think an example for that for next week, for example, now for game week 10 is Vardy. So, if you've got Vardy in, I think Vardy is a great option. We'll talk about captaincy later. And I actually think that Vardy is a good pick for the next 3. But if you're just bringing in Vardy just to jump on the next big thing, I think it's the wrong thing to do, because there are multiple other options there as well. And I think you should try and look at the weak points in your team and fix the weak points instead of trying to catch the hauls all the time. Catching a haul, as we all know, is bloody difficult. It's very hard to catch the right haul. Whereas if you're constantly just putting out the fire in your team, because all our teams have fires, right? Especially over this period now in December, what you don't want to have are all the potential superstars, them not hauling for captaincy, and the rest of your team is an absolute bloody mess as well. So I think that's my first point. Don't go chasing haul every week. Don't go chasing the best captaincy option every single week, unless they're naturally in your team or they've got a really nice run of fixtures. So I used De Bruyne this week as an example. I'm probably bringing De Bruyne this week. I'm not bringing him in just a captain. I'm bringing him in because they've got a really nice run of games. So that's the first point. I think another one. So probably a lot of our watchers and listeners are on Twitter, and I would ignore others' successes. I think it really, and I did this again last year. So I speak from experience from last year. All the things which I did to try and fix my seed, to try and get back onto green arrows, they just lead you down a red arrow path. And looking on Twitter, everyone, yes, I've captained so and so. I've got 70 points. Oh, is 70 a good score when you're sat on 32, right? And I've only scored 65 this week. Oh, what a bummer! And you're sat on 40 or whatever it is just ignore that, because that will force you into moves you don't want to make. You end up looking at their team, oh, they got this, they've got that, right? But I think that's another one, and kind of going hand in hand with it as well, it's limit hits. So end of last season, I was so determined to have a really good finish to game week 38 that I took out Kevin De Bruyne for a hit to get in whoever it was, Sterling, right? Because I was so convinced that Sterling was chasing the golden boot, rah, rah, rah. Had I not have done it, I'd have finished off with 175k better rank than what I had because I was chasing the next big thing for a hit as well. So that's a kind of start off for me there, Adam. What do you think?
I think there's some good things in there. I want to give a couple of shout outs to hub contributors. So Jossie, who is usually the richest man, well, he might be rich, I don't know, but in FPL terms, he's incredibly good with his team value. So he has recently gone on a journey from being around I think it was the 2.3 million mark to 800k. But he said what's paid off for him is making the obvious, sensible moves. So if the players he's brought in, he's defined as being fairly template. He's not been trying to seek an edge or look for, like you said, the next big thing. He's not trying to overcomplicate things. I think FPL Fairy's done something fairly similar. So he's gone from 2.5 million to 1 million. So I think it can be done. I think last season, and I think this is probably the best example I could think of because I haven't had too many absolute disasters. I've always had a part of a season which hasn't gone to plan. But last season, it took me, I think I was about 300,000 pre-COVID, pre-lockdown and all of that. And I ended up finishing 15k. And the reason I think for that was that I think there's opportunities to have really high ceiling weeks, and I think I took them quite well. I think the first one was the bench boost I used in Gameweek 30, and the thing that I've learned over the years is everybody, and I think this is probably for a bit later on, but everybody always maxes out on double game week players. Whereas the key lesson and the key learn that comes out all of the time is, have your double game week players, but then balance it out with some really good single week game week players. And I ended up having like probably my best ever game week as a consequence that accelerated me up. So I think learning from lessons from previous seasons is really, really good. I think patience, I think it's been put in the chat, I think, by one of the guys, which I think there's always a sense that it's probably the exact point that you've made, which is worded a bit different, but there's always a sense to try and chase and to try and think, well, I'm doing badly. I've got to rip down the houses and do something really different to get an edge. Whereas the reality is, let other people do that. I mean, you've talked about, I don't want to ruin your moves, but you've talked about an 8-point hit. I don't care what the moves are. It's a great move. I think everybody should take 8-point hits this week, and it'll guarantee, go for it. Go. Why stop there? Go 12-point hits. But I think that there's a tendency to try too hard, and I think doing the obvious moves. You've got to remember, there's 7 million people that play the game. What looks like the obvious move, what looks like the in vogue move on Twitter, isn't what everybody is doing. Not everybody. So a really good example of this, Bruno captain last week. It was for Salah owners. I wish I owned Salah. I would have made the exact same move. I didn't. But for Salah owners, it was an obvious move. It was it was. And I'm not even playing captain hindsight, but it was, you're replacing them with a big hitter that's got West Brom at home. And I think there can be a tendency to try too hard, like Captain Grealish or, whatever it would be. But it was a really, really obvious move. I don't think you should be afraid of them or get called, don't worry about getting called sheep, template, or any of those sorts of things.
How can you be a sheep for picking the best captaincy option of the week? In every prediction tool, in every metric, Bruno last week, I don't care what anyone says, was the best captaincy option last week, and he was unlucky not to mega haul. So anyone who rags out that decision, to me,
the Welshman getting defensive when sheep
is incorrect. Like you Adam, is incorrect. I just
exactly. I think that's the whole Twitter thing, isn't it? And the whole herd mentality. I think not playing it safe, but trying to do the obvious moves is a good thing to do. Thinking longer term as well. I'm trying to think of other things that have worked.
So I've got another one, and I'll use my own team now as an example. So I've kept faith with Robertson all the way through, because Robertson is a proven FPL player, fantastic asset. It hasn't worked for much of the season. Obviously, it worked last week. I didn't really expect it to work last week, but I think as well, now that I've got him in now, it saved me a transfer as well, and people are now looking to transfer in Robertson when I've already got him, if that makes sense. Again, I'm guilty, and this is what happens if you hop about trying to catch last week's points as an example. And another one for me now. So I've had Bruno in. I said at the start of the season he didn't perform. Everyone was, you shouldn't have Bruno, to waste of money. All of a sudden he is he's essential. Apparently, because over time it's going to happen. And this is why I'm so big on KDB now, is because he's probably one of the, if not the most proven FPL assets. And if it comes to 2 or 3 weeks down the line, you're struggling to get him in, you can't afford to get him in, you'll be taking hits. People already got his points. So this to me is why he is another one. So I think these proven assets, don't take them out if they blank after a couple of weeks. I think that's another one for me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm tempted. I really want the fixtures to be announced for December and January, because I think one thing that has been different this season, I feel it's held me back, is the whole wildcard situation. I'm not comfortable, and I'm trying to. I'm going to hold out now, but I'm the person who wildcards fairly early, so usually game week 3 to 6. Never. This is the first time I can remember holding on to my wildcard, and it's making me a bit uneasy and a bit on edge when I'm playing, and I'm desperate for these fixtures to come out, because I think as soon as they're released, I can wildcard. And, because I think then I'll be looking at the bench boost for having the right goalkeeper set up, for having all of those things. So I think that will definitely definitely help me. You made a good point earlier, I think, on the on midfielders and strikers. I think there could be, if I was wildcarding now, I think I would go Salah, De Bruyne, and Bruno. Probably Jota as check. I've got enough spaces first. Jota and Son maybe, if we can get all those in. But I would probably go with quite a heavy midfield, because I think the strikers are performing. I think we had this last season, so this is again something that was evident post lockdown. A lot of people went 3-5-2 because the midfielders returned, but the value strikers, the likes of Ings, Jimenez, Antonio last season, were performing. And I think you got Bamford, Watkins, I would trust with the fixtures. Antonio is going to be back soon. Calvert-Lewin. I think Jimenez is somebody you can trust, because he will get points throughout the course of the season. So there's plenty of cheaper or non-premium options out there. Tammy Abraham, somebody no one very rarely gets mentioned.
Keeps his place, yeah, definitely.
But with him, even if he doesn't start, he could come on and score. And given the amount of matches Chelsea have, he could get similar minutes to Timo Werner. It's quite feasible, and he's looked as good as Timo, in my opinion, in terms of. I think he's looked fairly decent. So, I think getting a structure you're happy with is definitely something worth considering as well. Is there anything else that you've got to add?
I think the main ones. I also think that no one's essential. So this is the thing with Salah, right? So it's been quite hard. Obviously I write articles on the Herb, and I come on the various, the podcasts and things, and chat around how I don't think Salah's worth the money, right? According to everyone else, if they don't have Salah, then they haven't got a team to a lot of people. I just don't think that's right. I think, you get your points. Okay, if someone scores a hat-trick, right? It was exaggerated in game week 1 because he scored a hat-trick. I missed out there, right? Missed out on 40-odd points. Hands up on that one, right? How many hat-tricks he's going to score over the season, right? And I think if you can have a really balanced, well-rounded team, if you can pick a captain who can return each week, even if it's 6, 7, 8, 9 points. You may get lucky and have a 13 points or a 15, whatever else. But if you've got a nicely rounded team, plan ahead, I think, is the other one as well. Like look at the fixtures now, right? So this is why I'm kind of moving away from Chelsea now and looking at Man City as well. Just because Chelsea are playing well, the next few fixtures they've got are quite tough. I think home to Leeds, they'll probably score a couple, but they're not going to hammer Spurs. They're not going to hammer Wolves. They're not going to hammer everyone else they're playing as well, right? Whereas City's fixtures now turn. So I think look kind of 6 or 8 weeks in advance and start to think about your moves now that you want to make to get your team in place. So then when it comes to that point, you're not then chasing the next big thing. You're actually looking at putting out the fires, like I mentioned earlier. So I think that's just kind of to summarize there. I think we're both agreeing. Just stay patient, not go mad. I think is
the only other thing I would add. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm a big believer on it, is decision-making process and the times you make decisions. I think Saturday night, for anyone that didn't know Bruno, it could have led to quite a few reactions. I'm not saying it would have been a bad transfer to bring in, but I think you can panic straight after a bad game week. I think stepping away from FPL is a good thing in general for a short period of time and reflecting and then calming yourself down. So you make logical, not emotional decisions, because it's very easy to make emotional decisions. I think most of us have, made rage transfers. I definitely have.
I just wouldn't make an early. I don't see the point now, genuinely, of making any early transfers unless you've got the exact money, and if you don't do it, then you're going to lose it on the move.
And you're 100% set on the player. 100%
set. I wouldn't even bother. There's so many cheap options. Look at the ones you mentioned earlier, right? We've now got Bamford, Calvert-Lewin, Watkins, Grealish, Jota, all these players, like top players who are underpriced, right? They are underpriced for how they're performing. It means you can just get anyone you want, right? Nearly in your team. Obviously you can't have Salah, KDB, or Bam, all the premiums. You can easily afford 3 and have a really good team still. So I don't understand why people.
Aubameyang's fell off a cliff, hasn't he? God, if you we haven't even. Every time you mention him, we get an injury.
Just
don't
laugh.
We?
So, either get cramp or we laugh.
They are so bad, Arsenal. It's hilarious.
It is.
Oh, sorry, Arsenal fans. But going forwards, they've got nothing. They've got absolutely no creativity whatsoever. So good one to put in if you want to get a clean sheet.